Supposedly Trump has been um, briefed on the tall white aliens, and I feel like saying a few words about my perspective and feelings on angels and my perspective and feeling on wishful thinking, um, just which boils down to me to is someone watching over us? Are we always protected? And what does that mean, right? Because so many people live in fear, although we don't really know how many people live in fear, right? This is something that is said. Fear is also very kin to excitement. You know, the Tao says, don't name the feelings, and you shall notice that they are not what you think they are, because feelings are forever changing. So let's say people are scared, however, and there are angels watching over them, but also there is the graduatory aspect of Earth where you sort of have to deal with your own shit. This is why you're here on Earth, right? You have to create or recreate or rebirth yourself into harmony, into the path, into what have you, right? And so do angels exist? I think yes. I think angels exist. This is to me almost a logical proposition because I have observed life and the cosmos to be magic. It's not really that strange. Life is always miraculous if you open your eyes. It's really inexplicable how all of this exists. It is inexplicable. I am not going to um, converse with Western reductionist science because I'm so um, sort of over addressing bridges with that sort of conversation. As a scientist, you're supposed to always be open to the ineffable. If you are not, then you are only open to the effable, and that says itself, right? But so to me, the cosmos is as such. It is miraculous, infinite, and it's not always easy to feel this, right, day to day, because we feel this way, we feel certain way, we feel lack, we feel disempowerment, so we feel like, well, life can be very shit, right? Um, but this is also something that comes from overwhelm, right? Because the options are just too many, and the comparison becomes overwhelming. You know, I don't have food with someone else that has food. A hungry animal will never think, oh, but you know, my neighbor's squirrel has food and I don't. The hungry animal will just deal with its hunger, however it does it, right? So all of suffering does quite logically come from the stories we tell ourselves, right? Um, but life is in actuality plentiful. It really is. There is enough for everyone and more. And this in itself is a miracle, right? You can just traverse the planet, you can traverse your own body, you can breathe, you can, make relationships, you can do all these things. It is, for me, a quite logical extrapolation that angels are a sort of evolution or a future blueprint for us, and we are a sort of three-dimensional expression of what the angels are. And someone I've been following for quite a while now, who talks a lot about the ascension of the earth, is Kabamur Taigeta. I'll link to his Twitter handle, and he has this beautiful website that talks about all the different extraterrestrial races and and so forth, and Pleiadians being the main stewards and parents and genetic upgraders of Earth. They were the ones who um, instated the human genome as it is today, because before it, there really were only monkeys, right? And so Kavamur Taigeta writes things like Pleiadians are actually supermen. They are godlike. They can fly through space. They can bilocate, meaning they can be in two places at the same time. In the earthly dimension, they can travel instantly. They can read minds. They can move objects with their minds and so forth, right? So you get the idea. They are Superman and more. And so a lot of people are, well, what do I do with that information? And the answer is nothing. You don't do anything with that information. Is what I tell myself, right? I say superpowers do exist, but before we sort of go for them, we sort of have to realize how we are already containing superpowers. Just walking upright, doing all the things we can do, taking a car somewhere. All of this is super. It's just that we get so dredged that we forget that we are already superhuman. You know, we can. Just yesterday, I was listening to a podcast about the possibilities of body, and just the body alone. If you watch what people can do to their bodies, all the different expressions their bodies can take. You know, say ballet or what a pole jumping, right? Pole hopping in the Olympics. All of this results in the body literally changing into almost a different species. Animals don't have this because animals behave quite homogeneously. A gorilla will most of the time sort of look like a gorilla, and so forth. Right? But humans, no. Humans are not only very individual, they are born very different, but they also then take such different paths based on passions that they epigenetically evolve into these crazy ways, right? I myself, I've been, when I was like 18, I weighed like 25 kilos more than I do now. I was like chubby. I was building muscle. I was just a different person, right? Then, when I was doing theater, I had a different look. Now I have a different look. And I'm still changing, right? It's just based on however we play around in the environment. So this in itself is also, to me, a proof of how there is this thing called magic, where a thought, an intention, if instated long enough, expresses itself in a way that really cannot be retraced factually. It can only be sort of intuited. Oh, yeah, he became like this because of thought, because of practice. But in the end, it sort of, it came from nowhere, right? It came from nowhere, and it was metaphysically begotten. Um, I look forward to meeting angels. I do. Uh, I should also mention that the Kamamur Taigeta writes that they are from Sweden, or rather Swedish looking. And this is because Archangel Michael was blonde, and they modeled, the Pleiadians, when they created themselves, modeled themselves after Archangel Michael. So they ended up looking Nordic, like Swedes do today, like Norwegians, I'd say Norwegians, or I live in Sweden, by the way. Norwegians and Icelandics are sort of the prototypical blondies. They're just so fair, so angel-like, and everybody thinks this when they see Nordics. They're like, "Oh my God, these people are really fair and beautiful and symmetrical." There's always the itch of eugenics, of racial theory, but why should there be? I think I'm ready to be over that. Nevertheless, Palladians modeled themselves after Archangel Michael, who looked like Hitler, like Hitler's uh, dream human, and then the first humans were actually instated in the north in Sweden, and so they look like Pleiadians, and Swedes have the angel look to them. And this is also something that the Veda says. I actually was in an Ayurvedic temple once, and I was talking to a guy. There was a guy teaching there, and the guy had met a Vedic master who said also that Veda, meaning life, began in the north. And I was like, what do you mean it began in the north? What about Africa? What about. And I didn't know about Pleiadians then, but then I read that Pleiadians instated humans in the north first in their own image, and this is now two sources. And you can say, well, what does that mean? Da da da. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm saying how I am thinking about this. But what I'm arriving at, I guess, is how it makes sense to me on yet a third level, because the Swedes have a peace about them. I have Polish roots. In Poland, there is quite of a temperament, as is known about Eastern climate, Eastern countries, Mediterranean countries, more temperamental, right? So I am from a Polish family, grew up in Sweden. All my life I've been watching this cool, this breezy cool, right? Swedes are, they're not so temperamental. And people will say, well, they don't have feelings, they're cold. And you can say that, but you can also say that there is an interoception. There's a natural sort of being born with internal arts to them, right? Meaning they live life from within. They are less defined by what is outside of them. Meaning and Swedes are atheists, right? So another sort of um, irony here, but I say that this further cements the argument that angels, or rather that Swedes are modeled after angels. Just this sentence alone, it sounds crazy, right? But it is not to me. Um, but what I was going to say is that it makes sense that Swedes are atheists, because when you have a certain level of peace inside of you, and when you have a certain level of integrity whereby you do not let yourself be defined by culture, family. I mean, you just do your own thing coolly, peacefully, but you really do your own thing. You don't let other people program your desires and your life plans. Then the conversation about a monotheistic God becomes very different, right? Because you have such faith in and of yourself, by your integrity, by your peace, that thinking about a benevolent source outside of yourself that is looking out for you, that you should appease, becomes quite not only superfluous, but very unneeded, right? You don't really go there, right? Because you're like, why am I interested in a step parent like that? I don't need a step parent. I have the light. I have the peace. And Swedes were always to me this. Of course, I battled with jealousy about this, so I always also um, leaned into how Swedes are passive aggressive. But this is also natural. Swedes are passive aggressive because at some point a person might want to start living up to a sort of myth about themselves, meaning, oh, I am so peaceful and I will try to contrive this. And so that becomes a passive aggression. It is what you see a lot in the hippie communities these days, in the ascension communities. You see people being limerent, you see people being, ooh, but love and peace. But they're not really feeling it. They're just contriving it, and there's a duality and a hypocrisy that happens. So this happens in Sweden, of course, as well. But you also see the real stuff. You also see the how really, Roald Dahl said that are you become as beautiful as ugly as your thoughts are. That's fair, I think. It is quite fair. Swedes are fair. Swedes are fair in the sense that they are light seeming, they are symmetrical seeming. There's something to this. So I've rambled, but I hope that the takeaway becomes that there is no need to believe or disbelieve in angels when you have the option of exploring peace and light within yourself. There is no need to either believe or disbelieve in angels or Swedes if you have the option to within yourself become fair, become light, become, quite frankly, without the need to have a God whatsoever. I guess that is the crux of all of this. You don't need a God, or maybe rather, you don't need a conversation about God if you are like a lot of Swedes are. Okay, just naturally cool. To me, spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, again, we humans put such loads on words that spirituality is really, it comes down to one thing: be cool. Be cool. If you can't be loving, if you can't be compassionate, just be cool. Be cool. Just be cool. Okay? And it doesn't mean Matthew McConaughey cool. It just means, I think you know what it means.